Hello, can you hear me? there. I'm Russ Wenham, Chairman of the Planning Commission. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And the first thing I'm going to do is turn it over to our clerks here for a roll call.
Chair Wenham,
Here.
Vice Chair Willem.
Present.
Commissioner Balkovac.
Here.
Commissioner Godert.
Here.
Commissioner Minor.
Here.
Commissioner Nance, absent. Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Approval of the minutes. So we have some old leftover minutes due to some quorum issues in past. So they go back to December 9. And does anyone have any comments, questions, or is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of December 9th, 2025.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second that.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I think I saw one person, their lips did not move. Okay, we got one abstain right here, so we catch it with Commissioner Willem. And then announcements. Are there any announcements? Nope, none from the, over there. Over there. Now I say over there. What were you called earlier today? What was your title? The main event?
Yeah.
We'll bring that up later.
Yeah. Thank you
Sorry,
for
I was
that.
at
I appreciate that.
I was at a separate meeting where he was referred to as the main event. So before we get into the Planning Commission items, I would like to turn to Director Pagan. And if you don't mind introducing the staff, and then if there's any other consultants that are going to speak, they can introduce as we go, whatever feels best to you.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, as usual, we have Elizabeth Stedman and Jennifer Gannon clerking our meeting for us. The usual folks up here you're used to seeing, Christian Curtis, City Attorney, Josh Anthony, Assistant Public Works Director, myself, Jeremy Pagan, Director of Public Works, Lily Toy is our Planning Manager, and then in the audience who will be presenting here shortly is Dan Amsden, our Planning Consultant on this project. And I'll let him introduce, we have our Environmental Sub-Consultant or on Dan's team. I'll let Dan introduce them when he comes up to the dais here shortly, and that's on the city side.
Very good. I think you refer to yourself as Director of Public Works.
Director of Development Services.
Thank you.
I'm
Was
not
I the
that.
only one that caught that?
I thought he was Assistant Director of Public Works.
You said that.
I was
You-
speaking
you-
quickly.
I'd swear you said that. We'll all be listening to it later.
We'll listen to the tape back, I guess.
No problem. I'll try not to harass you again. So on to Planning Commission items, 4A is consent calendar. We don't have any, so we'll move on. We'll move right on to 4B, public hearings. And 4B1 is a notice of preparation scoping meeting to solicit comments on the scope and content of the environmental impact report for the Reading Riverfront specific plan update. And I know that I see Dan from MIG moving up to the podium. I want, by way of process, for people in the audience that maybe have not attended one of these meetings, there'll be a staff and consultant presentation. There'll be an opportunity then for commissioners, if we have any questions or comments or clarifications of staff and consultants, and then we will have a public hearing. And when we have a public hearing, if you would like to speak, we'd like you to fill out one of the little purple, red, or pink cards, whatever color they are today. They're in the back. All you need to do is put your name down and say you want to talk about the riverfront, and we'll know what it is. You bring it up here and hand it to one of these two clerks, and you will be in the queue. When the time comes, I will call your name plus the next person in line, and I'll remind you when the time comes, but ask you to kind of line up next to it. We don't have a huge number of people here, but I always get concerned when there's a lot of people speaking that sometimes it goes too long because people like me talk too long. And so I like to get them lined up moving quickly so that people don't get up and leave out of frustration they didn't have time to speak. So with that, I will stop. I don't see any glaring from the city attorney. We were talking about that earlier, how we can read each other's eyes if I'm off track. And we will turn it over to, looks like we're turning it over to Dan from MIG.
That's correct. Dan, take it away.
Commissioners. Oh, there we go. Now I'm live. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Dan Amazon with MIG, so I've been the principal in charge on the specific plan process, which has been underway for about 2.5 years or so. And tonight I'm going to go through an overview of the specific plan process, but really the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get comments from the commission, from the community, or public agencies on the scope of the environmental analysis So I'll go through some slides relative to that as well. And on the phone this evening is Paula Hartman. She's a principal at MIG. She leads our environmental planning team. So she's here to field additional questions that may come up as well.
Just one moment. Jennifer, can you turn his microphone up just a little bit? I've got my normal limitation here. Thank you.
All right, is that
Thank you.
better?
I'm going to be happy with
All
it.
right, lean in a little bit. Okay, is that better?
Thank you so
There
much.
we go, okay. So I will jump in. So this project is focused on the future of the Reading Riverfront. This is a specific plan project, so it's not a development project, but it's the city's policy guidance for future land use, environmental preservation, mobility, circulation, all these components for the riverfront area. This diagram shows the boundary of the specific plan in that black dashed line, and includes the civic areas in the north, as well as what we refer to as the southern riverfront, essentially extending all the way to Cypress. This is the overall schedule of the project. As I mentioned, we're a little under 2.5 years into the process. I will use my pointer here. We're essentially right here in winter, early 2026, but starting the full production of the specific plan document as well as the environmental analysis. And we're actually preparing both of those in tandem so they can inform each other. But coming up in late spring, have another round of public review, comments, and feedback once we have the detailed specific plan. But some background on the process. We started this process back in late 2023, organized the community coalition that included property owners, leasees, neighbors, interested partners, tribal members, as well as folks representing the environmental community, that had 4 different meetings to frame a vision and guiding principles for the future of the riverfront area. So big picture objectives, community vision, which was eventually taken to city council. Those were public meetings. We had public comments during those meetings. We've also held now 3 rounds of community engagement workshops and surveys with around 480, a little under 500 participants combined at those various meetings. A lot of comments, a lot of feedback, online surveys as well that had close to 1,000 people responding to different ideas and providing comments. We've also had ongoing discussions with all these groups and many others over the last 2 years to get a lot of feedback, detail, and discussions, which has really led into this vision framework and guiding principles that was presented and discussed and refined with City Council a little over a year ago. This really is focused on all of these components of the riverfront area, so ensuring that any new changes, improvements, plans, projects result in a healthy and resilient natural environment, respect the indigenous community, past, present, and future, are environmentally sensitive but also economically viable, especially around the arts, cultural, and entertainment venues, have appropriate scales and uses for this area, include world-class recreation activities. They're connected, so circulation, pedestrian mobility, bike mobility, but also vehicles and parking, and also memorable and vibrant places, bringing energy. And so all of these are working in parallel. One's not necessarily more important than the other, but they all need to work as part of the planning process. This is the vision framework diagram, which can be thought of as sort of a combination of a land use diagram and a circulation diagram. This was discussed with City Council last November, and they provided us some direction so we can start framing the details in the draft specific plan. But it's looking at moving uses further away from the river's edge in the northern riverfront by about 150-foot buffer, rethinking the civic area and options for different types of facilities and different connections, including secondary access from the northern riverfront, as well as improvements to the southern riverfront area as well. More detailed information on all of this is on the project website also. But what's really key is a focus on implementation as part of this planning process. So this is a little bit out of order here, but the implementation piece of a specific plan is really key. Ultimately, this is going to be a City of Reading document, a policy document, But as new projects, whether there's street redesigns or new trails or environmental restoration areas or new buildings, they will need to be consistent with the specific plan. So it's really the city's land use and regulatory document for this area. And as part of that implementation, really thinking about the environment, economic development, and additional partnerships, public, private, and tribal, as all working together around economic development for this area. And so the plan, in addition to outlining the vision framework, it's also going to include updated policies and standards, design guidelines, development streamlining for projects that are consistent with the plan, CEQA documentation or environmental documentation we'll talk about more tonight, but also opportunities for coordination. So it's really the city and community's vision for this area for the future, but provides some guidance on financial components like land leases, grants, TOD revenues, bonding, financial components, as well as these land use components. Some emerging ideas that we discussed with council back in November, the team's providing more detail on for the northern riverfront. As I mentioned, rethinking some of the connections as pedestrians move through the site, rethinking the layout of some of the venues and uses, but also moving, again, farther away from the river and freeing up more disturbed land today that's used for parking or other uses to focus on environmental restoration. This is sort of a long-term or full build-out vision that maybe has some connections to redesign Highway 44 as well. But again, this is a planning document. It's not an actual project. So we're going to include options and flexibility in the future for how to connect as this area is invested in and transitioned over time. But it could also include new private development on private property next to 44, sort of the southern part of the loop road, potential secondary hotel that can come into this area as well. I do want to also mention there is currently a specific plan for this area that already is adopted by the city, it was adopted back in 1992. So technically we're updating the specific plan based on this new vision and feedback from the community and commission and council. Some ideas for Southern Riverfront is really trying to find ways to create some of the incremental development that was envisioned in the last plan and really looking at a way to partner with the private property owner to combine a roadway redesign along Park Marina Drive tied to new development in the Southern Riverfront. Most of Southern Riverfront is one property owner, so we've been working really closely with that owner and the different folks associated with that owner to make sure it is a viable plan. Obviously, there's a lot of flood issues and connections to the river, so these are all things that'll be further detailed as we go through the planning process to create the actual draft-specific plan for the next round of review. So with that, that's a quick overview of the planning process. Again, a lot more materials are on the project website, but tonight is really a chance to talk about the environmental review process. So tied to a specific plan, the city also needs to do an environmental impact report as required by CEQA. An environmental impact report is really intended to be an informational document designed to inform public decision-making process and the potential environmental impacts of the different things that are included in the specific plan. As a problem-solving tool, it can help avoid or reduce project impacts. So one, it evaluates what those impacts could be, but then mitigation measures or alternatives if those impacts are identified. Key components of the EIR, an executive summary, but also a detailed project description. And then we get into environmental impact analysis around the existing context, thresholds, potential project impacts, cumulative impacts, so potential impacts off-site or outside of just the planning area of the riverfront. And then, as I mentioned, mitigation measures, or if it is identified, significance after mitigation, and also alternatives as part of this as well. So it's a robust process. This chart shows how it's robust with all the different topical areas that are covered in an EIR. But as a city policy document, this will be a program level EIR. So similar in scope to the city's general plans EIR. So it analyzes program level effects on the environment The analysis will focus on issues present in the project area and potentially impacted by all these different categories. So I won't go through and read all the categories, but it's a comprehensive EIR process. As far as the CEQA process, again, this is running in parallel with the details of the draft specific plan. The first part of the process is distributing the notice of preparation, which we did on January 28th. That is the current period we're in right now, which is soliciting input on the content or topics or things for consideration within the environmental analysis document. We will then take the feedback, take the comments, and prepare the draft EIR. That will then have a notice of completion, and then distributing the draft EIR for another round of public review, feedback, and comments. So the purple boxes are the public comment or review periods of these documents on the environmental side. Once that draft EIR is public, we'll solicit comments on the adequacy of the draft EIR, and then prepare what's known as a final EIR, which is responses to those comments as part of the environmental process. Ultimately, at the end of this process, and after another round of community engagement, we'll have a specific plan and environmental document that will go before the Planning Commission and City Council for another round of public hearings, ultimately for adoption of the specific plan and certification of the EIR. So that's a lot to go through, but I want to sort of explain the process. There'll be 2 rounds plus public hearings for comments and feedback on the environmental analysis. So for tonight, as part of the CEQA required NOP scoping meeting, which is the key agenda item tonight, it's really an opportunity to provide comments again on the scope of the environmental impact report, the things we should be looking at, want to make sure we're considering, evaluating. So on behalf of the city or on behalf of the project team, we welcome any public comments on the scope of the environmental analysis. You can provide comments tonight or written comments. The comment period goes until March 2nd, so we still have a few more weeks left for comments. If folks would like to submit them via email, the email address is there, info@readingriverfront.org. We're making sure we're capturing all of the comments during this comment period, or you can mail comments directly to the city. So the option to provide verbal comments tonight or email or mail. We want to make sure we have a lot of options available. That is the end of the presentation component, but I was just going to keep this up for public benefit. But Paul and I are happy to field any questions planning commissioners may have.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and start off with a couple of questions. Now, this is the public scoping meeting as required by the process. Was there also an agency scoping meeting where you guys sat down with invited governmental entities and had their own scoping meeting?
We've sent out notices to all partner agencies. This meeting generally covers both.
I
The
see.
notice both the same.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure. I've been accustomed to seeing it done a little different. Now, the other thing, this is really just for the benefit of those that haven't been in the middle of one of these, but at this point, I assume you already have, in conjunction with the city staff, a very detailed initial study that probably covers a whole bunch of pages and comes and analyzes the context and comes to a lot of potential, identifies potential impacts, potential significance, and that sort of thing, or does that come after this?
That comes out this. I'll pass it to Paula, her voice will come down from above, but she's on the phone right now.
My voice will come down from above. Hello, this is Paula Hartman of MIG. Unfortunately, Dan, although I can hear you crystal clear, I am not able to hear every other word, perhaps, of the planning commissioners. So it's difficult for me to know what the question is.
Okay, so a little bit of IT issue, but I'll repeat. The question was the timing of the initial study as part of the EIR production process.
The timing of the initial study is part of this. Okay, so it depends on how we want to do this, since we have determined that the project merits an EIR. CEQA does not require us to prepare an initial study checklist. However, if we decided to do, if the cities determined that it's necessary, helpful to do the initial study checklist, then that would be our priority action item immediately. So that's something we would target, but it is not required. And that's perhaps a discussion we would want to have about what makes the most sense.
I'll ponder that a moment. Okay, those are just my only technical questions. I was going to turn to other commissioners. It's my understanding that this is our first opportunity, at least in the official recorded comment period here, to identify items that we think should be addressed in the environmental impact report. So with that, I will turn it over to fellow commissioners.
Good evening. I'm going to reserve the right to present other comments in writing before the deadline. But for this evening, there's two items that I'd like to see the EIR address. First, when mitigation measures or public amenities depend on ongoing operations and maintenance, I think the EIR should address whether those ongoing activities have environmental implications. For example, trail maintenance, lighting, irrigation, erosion control, use of pesticides. So how that ongoing activities will affect the environment there. Secondly, I'd like a cumulative look at ecological impacts rather than viewing impacts project by project. And I did notice on your checklist that you have a cumulative impact section, so I'm glad to see that. But the focus should be on the ability for the riverfront corridor to absorb combined impacts from access, lighting, events, and development without degrading the environment. So those are my two comments for the evening.
Do you know how much of this specific plan falls into the FEMA, like flood zone or designation?
We do. Off the top of my head, I don't know the acreage, but essentially the eastern half of the northern riverfront and sort of the central portion of the southern riverfront, including the Kuchers Park area, is all within the 100-year floodplain.
And will the EIR evaluate the levee improvements, or is that being considered, into the EIR?
As part of the specific plan process, it would require for any areas that are in floodplain, which is really the southern riverfront, northern riverfront part is considered environmental protection. But in the southern riverfront, for those to be developable, they'll have to be moved out of the floodplain. And so there's a process for that, but the environmental analysis will also look at the potential impacts of that as a policy decision. And of course, that need to be coordinated with federal government and state regulators.
Okay.
Commissioner Ryan, nothing? Commissioner Minor? Not right now. I just had a couple of items. One is, not necessarily your EIR scoping, but I can't pass up the opportunity to say that my number one community event in all of Reading is the rodeo. And so in some way, some fashion, I've got to go to that rodeo every year. So how that gets preserved for long-term, I personally am very flexible about that, whereas I know others are not. But as long as I get to put on my buckle and my boots and go to an amazing rodeo every year, then I'm a happy man, preferably more than once. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That was the short version. Some people heard the long version earlier. The next thing that kind of comes to my mind, and I've thought about this for many years, is people get very strongly opinioned about the riverfront. And By disclosure, for example, I worked on Dignity's project that is getting close to being occupied at this point, just south of this project area. And I will say I was quite surprised at some of the negative comments on what used to be a aggregate operation. And it was at that time I kind of came to the conclusion, and this is just one man's opinion, but I guess I get to throw it out there. There's enough riverfront in Reading to go around. And if there's anything that's lacking, it's things that will drive a vibrant, thriving, economically vital community. The entire opposite bank through this entire area is native and untouched. There are very few cities that have as much untouched riverfront as we do. So I just am a big believer in there's enough to go around, and we need to really be focusing on things that for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years will set the stage for thriving hospitality, tourism, recreation, commercial, and that sort of thing. So just my opinion, and we have an opportunity to do so, and I see many of those elements in here, and that makes me happy. The other thing that I would throw out is really just making sure flexibility is built into whatever we do. Now, I realize that's more what's in the specific plan as opposed to what's in the environmental document, but you're doing an environmental document based upon a project description. And I'd like to make sure that there's plenty of flexibility there so that as we saw in the downtown specific plan, the one new parking structure, for example, is not at one of the two locations that were identified conceptually for the parking structures. But the right decision was made, and that was considered to be well within the range of what was identified. So I just want to remind about flexibility because grants and private investment are going to drive what happens here. It's not going to be the ability for the city to take, we call them bonds, I call them mortgages. The ability for the city to take out a mortgage to finance great big improvements will likely be rather nominal in years to come, even based upon history. So grants and private investment, and what are we doing to set the stage for that? Otherwise, nothing happens. Nothing overstated, very little will happen. And the last comment I would make is with regard to the floodplain. There's a whole bunch of the floodplain in the southern section that is just barely in the floodplain. And there's multiple categories of floodplain, and it's in the areas that floods very little and actually conveys very little water. In fact, some portions are already paved, have buildings, and have aggregate areas, gravel. And it's in the floodplain. Those areas, hopefully, the opportunity will be set for those areas to be lifted, meaning filled, and it will be shown, I would predict, that the impact on the water surface elevation will be something that can't even be measured on the Sacramento River because it's on the inside of the bank where it's not carrying flow, it's carrying storage. And so, and I know this just because our firm did the study for Dignity. We had to remap, I think, an entire mile of the river floodplain for the Dignity project, and we're able to learn quite a bit about that. So I just say that there are some great opportunities to take some of those areas and lift it out of the floodplain, maybe create the storage. River hydrology is about where you're storing your water and also how you're conveying it. There are ways to do it and take some of those areas that would otherwise remain somewhat underutilized and most likely blighted as they are today, unless we create the opportunity to do something else. So those were my comments, at least for the moment. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments from commissioners, at this point what we will do is we'll move on to the public hearing. So again, by way of reminder, in a moment I'm going to open the public hearing. I have some speaker cards here. Looks like there's 6 or 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not very good at estimating. I have 5 speaker cards. There's still the opportunity until the public hearing is closed to bring a card up here if you wish to speak. You'll be allotted 3 minutes. There will be a timer that shows that. We're going to stay pretty close to that. I'm going to start talking over you when we get beyond 3 minutes to kind of encourage you to bring it to a close. And I'm going to go down the comment cards as they've been given to me, just in the order that they were turned in today. And so I will also, let's see, anything else for the public comment? I think that's it. Make sure you use the microphone because as we saw there earlier, I'm the token guy that points out that not everybody hears the same. So make sure you're heard because the minutes and what you have to say is very important. With that, I'm going to open the public hearing and I'm going to call to the podium Robin Falshier. And your choice is to either take the low desk or the high desk at your choice. And following Robin is Skip Barker if you want to move up to the on deck. And after Skip will be Robert Sid. Thank you. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Commissioners, for your attention to this important part of our city. My name's Robin Falshier. I live near the project area, the planning area, and my family owns property within it. Just a few assorted comments. Is it State Route 299 or 44? To the extent that that can be clear within the planning documents and perhaps clarified by signage so that visitors to the site, their GPS will be accurate and stuff. I don't know the story behind that one, but as far as riparian vegetation, I don't know that the city's general vegetation guidelines are adequate for this very special planning area, and maybe some specific guidelines should be developed emphasizing native riparian vegetation. And I think it's probably already being addressed, but sidewalks along Park Marina Drive, pedestrian crossings on Park Marina Drive. My mother's 87 years old, and for her to get across Park Marina to come to my house is daunting. And pedestrian access to the Sundial Bridge, really walking in front of the hotel parking lot. The mouth of Calaboose Creek is particularly sensitive area. A friend owns property about a mile upstream from the mouth at the river and has seen river otters. And so that area should be very carefully analyzed. Lighting in the riparian zone, of course, I think is being addressed. And then lastly, I am a truck driver and have a commercial driver's license, you know, big rig, 53-foot trailers. And Park Marina Drive is surprisingly heavily used by commercial vehicles, partly because DMV, when they administer the test for getting a license, their route typically includes Park Marina Drive. And so you might want to include DMV on the scoping if they haven't already been, and consider the vegetation along that route to adequately accommodate large trucks. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Next, we had Skip, and after Skip is Robert, and after Robert will be Rendlich, perhaps. I've only come close on names, so excuse me. Take it away, Skip.
Good afternoon, Council or Planning Commission. Appreciate the time to let me speak for a minute. I represent the Ready Rodeo. I'm not very good at speaking here, so bear with me. But I noticed on the plan, on the concept drawing, the rodeo grounds are being moved. We went to the city, did all of our stuff with them, got a lease, showing the grounds that we're at to stay there now. And I got a concern that this document becomes a city document. We go to build, we're going to be told, no, we can't build there because the plan has changed. So I get real concerned about that. That's basically what I got to speak about, is that there's flexibility left in it. We don't have to move our building, our grounds. it's hard to go plan something, like you're saying, getting grants and monies, if you don't know if you're gonna stay there or not. Who's gonna wanna give you the grants to do that stuff? So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip. Next, we have Robert Sid, and then Ren, I'm determined to get this, Red Litch. I'm not sure I've seen things spelled that way before, but
Hi there. Thank you. I've been out of the loop here for a couple of years on the riverfront area because of work, but when I was following it more closely, the major concern then and the major concern now, one of the major ones was that we did not want housing on the riverfront. And I don't see where that was specified that there would be housing. In fact, I saw something up there that said housing. And I know the gentleman that presented wanted us to stick to the environmental scope of it, but he's not in charge. So I will defer to you, sir.
I will. Go ahead and speak to the project description during your time, sir.
Thank you very much. So I'm just concerned that is not the will of the people. It hasn't been for several years. And as my friend former Mayor DeQuisto says, it's a done deal and they're going to do what they're going to do. Now, being a fatalistic Italian like him, I tend to agree. But at the same time, I'd like to think that there was room for responsible development. And my father was a builder and developer in Los Gatos, and I grew up on his job. So I understand that, and I know there's realtors and developers up here, and I'm good with that. My background is in landscape, commercial industrial management, large-scale landscape properties back in the Bay Area. And on the habitat restoration front, I think it would be really good to have some kind of protection or buffer from it being invaded by, transients or homeless people that would be, squatting on the land. Also for public safety, because it would be a nice area to kind of just, as a vagrancy opportunity, it looks like. So I'm not sure how that would work or what the maintenance, I think one of the commissioners was talking about the maintenance of the landscape and the irrigation. We have a problem in Reading with, sticking a tree in the ground and then not maintaining it, not watering it. And then when it dies, it becomes nobody's problem. So that's part of what we talked about in the tree commission. So I'm grateful that you're giving the public a chance to talk on this, and I'm just hopeful that you will take the people's consideration that we don't want housing on the riverfront, and happy to have really good responsible development, but within the scope of the land that will bear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next up is Ren, and after Ren is Susan Murray.
Hello. As a whole, the EIR should include an equal analysis of the southern riverfront as well as northern. I know that most of the concern is, where the rodeo grounds and stuff are, but the southern needs equal attention. And the EIR should also explore, I think it's already going to, but it should explore all the hypothetical future land designation changes that may or may not be made, because this is a general plan, so there's going to be a lot of possibilities, so everything should be explored that can be. Specific impacts on riparian habitat and wildlife corridors, we're talking a lot about people being able to move around and bike around, but the animals should also be able to do that without having to cross a highway, et cetera. Any human activity like noise and light pollution, which is probably already covered, but that's going to have an impact on bats, birds, et cetera. Again, cultural land use by indigenous peoples, taking that into consideration. And let's see. Yeah, I think that keeping the river and the riverfront as natural as possible should be a priority. It's beautiful and it should be preserved. And I think that the importance of conducting a proper EIR, especially on a river, cannot be understated. The amount of untouched riverfront that Reading has, I think, is very special and unique, and it should be protected and stewarded properly. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the last card that I have is Susan Murray.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. All the speakers have brought up a lot of good reasons why things need to be looked into. I have attended so many of these meetings and discussions since it was first brought up because it is so close to my home. I have lived in the Garden Tract for over 30 years. As I walk about the neighborhood, I am seeing new life to the Garden Tract. Younger families with children and without children are moving in. I see life changing for these young families. I believe they pick the Garden Tract like I did so many years ago to raise a family in. This Garden Tract is a place that is usually peaceful, quiet, and safe, and it is a great place to take a walk with your children, take a bike ride, or walk your dog. I do not feel that it will be a very safe place for my neighbors if we have an influx of traffic because of the Riverfront Specific Plan. I understand that the Riverfront Specific Plan is going to happen, but please consider how people will be traveling to and from this new area on Park Marina especially. Please take our wonderful old neighborhood into consideration and the people who walk, bike, etc., and think of the safety aspect when you make these decisions. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Seeing no more speaker cards, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to commission and staff. I think I will start with staff. Are there any follow-up comments that you have at this point?
Not at this time, I don't think so.
Okay, very good.
You'd like me to address certain questions that public had, but my understanding is we're more getting feedback in the scoping session, so unless directed, I don't have any answers at this point.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way. We're gathering information today, and I didn't hear anything particularly earth-shattering that hasn't already been brought up along the way in the process, and that I'm going on faith, is included in the to-do list and the non-checklist. But we'll talk later for my education purposes of how that works. With that, I'll turn to Commissioner Minor.
Yeah, I do have a couple quick questions. Just one of the comments regarding the DMV, I thought that was pretty interesting, and just from a traffic standpoint, if we could discuss with them where they reroute, especially for larger traffic. Obviously, that's well out of scope of necessarily this item, but thought it was worth pointing out for traffic in the room. And then the question, the second item was, Director Pagan, you and I have talked about the kind of FEMA requirements to bring a building up. If a building that's in the floodplain gets improved by 50%, to bring that up to code entirely. One of the observations I made is that might involve actually lifting a building, something that's really truly economically infeasible or almost impossible to do practically. A suspicion of mine is that is one of the reasons why the buildings that are currently on the southern part of the riverfront are in less good condition or haven't been updated, is because if they get updated to a certain extent, then they have to entirely improve the building. In our EIR and riverfront process, is there anything that we can do to make that a little, I know that's a FEMA requirement, however, is there anything that we can do to make that a little less stringent or allow people to, in a way, improve those buildings without having to do something that I would consider economically infeasible, like lift the building, up several feet in the air to get it out of the floodplain and bring it up to code.
My initial thought is, I know last we discussed this, our floodplain ordinance does have that language. When we talked with FEMA to change it or revise it, and I'll look at our floodplain administrator here, Ms. Toy, but if we were to change that or relax standards in our floodplain ordinance, it has consequences for our FEMA rating as a jurisdiction, right? And so there's that balancing act when FEMA reviews our ordinance. I'm not even sure if by law we could, in fact, change that particular piece. I can't recall, Lily, if you do, but I know changes to our floodplain ordinance affect our rating from FEMA.
Right, currently, our floodplain ordinance meets the minimum requirements of FEMA. So you would be substandard if you change those standards. The EIR document is not a tool to change regulations.
Right.
So on the EIR side, but perhaps, when we get further along into drafting specific plan language, we could think about or explore goals or policies in the document that could be specific to floodplain management and or construction in the floodplain, insofar as we have the ability to, that doesn't violate, state law, of course. So it could be something that lands there more than scoping for environmental. It could be actual draft plan language when we get there.
Right. Well, if we could put a pin in that, I will likely bring it up later if you don't. So just a pin in that anything that we can do, I'd certainly love to see new fancy buildings out of the floodplain, but between now and when the private capital and the grants line up, it could be, we could be talking decades. And I would prefer to see updated buildings than, buildings in their current condition. So anything we can do to drive, encourage investment in the buildings as is while we wait for the private capital and the grant funding to line up, I think is advantageous. Thank you for making a note on that.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
It's a good comment. Please take it away.
Just a couple of things that I would like to see in the EIR, since we haven't seen it, is the plan for the growth impacts that the plan, is that being evaluated, the growth that's going to happen under this plan? And any secondary development that pressures like adjacent to this, and that leads me to the school that's kind of close to it. And then they mentioned like public safety and park services. So those are things I'd like to see in the EIR.
Very good. Anything else from the commissioners? Commissioner Ryan, no? Okay. On this end, no. With that, then I'm going to bring this item to a close and move on to item number 5. And item number 5 is for public comment for non-agendized matter. So any other matter within the city's jurisdiction, ideally within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction, that's not on the agenda. Now is the time for that. I'm seeing that we do not have any speaker cards. With no one to speak on that item, we will move along to the next item. And the next item is Commissioners' comments, item number 6. Any particular comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, item number 7, Director's Report.
Yeah, just a couple, two small updates, I guess I'd offer. We do have some zoning code updates coming in the near future as we continue to satisfy our housing element program activities. So be on the lookout for that. I won't give any more detail at this meeting because it's not agendized as such. I think you also had a good roadmap that Dan provided in terms of next steps in this process. So certainly throughout the next few months into spring and into early summer, we'll be continuing to check in. We'll have community engagement, as Dan mentioned, and then it'll be coming before this body in springtime, late spring, as we begin the public hearing process. Last thing I'll note, and I haven't talked about it in a while, is our tree ordinance. I do have it as my goal to get that here to the commission in the spring. I do have a new city manager, new boss starting next week, so I'll be checking in with him in terms of priorities. But it is my goal to get it to this body and have your feedback and sort of put that, I don't want to say put it to bed, but It's been long on my list, just been struggled to get to it. So that should be coming here in the coming months, so long as it lines up with other priorities we have going on. And as this project winds to a close, should free up some time to tackle some of these other projects that we've been meaning to get to for some time. So be on the lookout for a draft tree ordinance, revisiting that, and getting that project through this body and onto the city council. So those are just a few updates I have for you today. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Seeing none, then I guess before we adjourn, two things. I wanted to thank Dan from MIG for coming out today. Appreciate you traveling up here for the presentation, all the work you're doing. Thank you very much. And thank you to staff on this project. It's there's a handful of things in my consulting career I say are not for the faint of heart, and this whole process is one of them. And so thank you to Director Pagan for leading the charge. This is a big deal. And then the other one is the unsung heroes. You know, you saw the stress before our meeting started. Elizabeth and Jennifer down here. And I just want to say thank you, that I know that both of them take it very serious when things are not working right, and thank you for working so hard. You are greatly appreciated. And I just want to make sure that you had that thank you publicly. And with that, we will adjourn.